Welcome to Planet of the Associations. I am Seth Kahan.
And I'm Mark Levy.
And what are we doing here, Mark?
Yeah. So Planet of the Associations, it's about the association of the near future. It is 3 years from now. It's not today. It's 3 years from now. And speaking about looking 3 years from now, when we last spoke, you were talking about a methodology that you had used at the World Bank in order to understand where constituents in a problem, I don't know what you would call them, right? People. I was using a consulting word.
That's right.
People. Right. Consultants, we have to use words like that so we can charge money. If I said people, I could only charge like $1.75 if I said people.
My first lesson in consulting was that when people start talking to you, you got to shake your head. We put on a really serious face, look at the floor and say, it sounds really bad.
Right.
Really bad. But I can help.
Right. Even worse than you could imagine. Right. So you were talking about how, as an association, it's if you have disparate groups, disparate audience who are looking for different things to happen, you can actually kind of start seeing where their interests converge and where their interests actually, what they might be in the near future, like a few years down the road. So that's where we had stopped last time. Tell us about that. Go back into that.
Yeah, I think it's very germane to associations because associations guard a particular sector. There's a particular, a segment of society that they're in charge of really understanding and helping to develop and grow. And one of the big challenges is to see where things are going. What does the future look like? And one of the great experiences of large group facilitation is that you get so many different perspectives, but all kind of focused in the same direction. And the place where I really was able to put this to work was at the World Bank when we built communities of practice. And a community of practice is a group of people who have a practice in common, to be distinguished, by the way, from communities of interest. So let's say you're a Xerox repairman. You should have inky hands. You should, your fingernails should be chipped. You should have your toolbox. And if you're just interested in how copying machines work, you don't qualify. That's another shell out, right? We're only talking about the people who are actually going to go and try and repair the machines themselves. Same thing with anything. So if you have a group of educators, they need to be involved in education. Policymakers need to be making policy. Not people who are interested in making policy, people who are making policy. And so communities of practice, we formed these. We formed over 120 of them in just a couple of years, and they were in various sectors: education, highways, agriculture, the environment, so on and so forth. And in each one of these areas, we had multiple people participating. And my job was to work with those multiple people and help them chart their path forward in their community of practice. And so we would ask them, what are the big issues that you're facing? What are the things that you wish you could do? Where's the future of the field? And any one person has a lot of answers to those questions. But when you take all of the answers to those questions, you start to see patterns. And only someone who's listening to all of the people can see where those patterns are pointing. And that was my special situation. I was the one who they were all talking to. And so then I could help them to articulate where was the frontier of their field. And then that's something they would get very excited about because they were all invested in that field. And we would work together to develop the frontier of that field.
Interesting. So the frontier of the field, what define that? I know what a front. So it seems to me, I know I just asked you to define it, but I'll define it.
Okay, you do that.
Chill out for a second. I'll
have some of my tea.
Right. So the frontier is kind of, this lawless place that's up ahead. That I guess the front, right? I should look at the etymology of these things. It's at the front. It's kind of a lawless or semi-lawless place where things are forming and there's a lot of unknowns. But someone needs to go out there and, they need to establish boundaries or they need to establish things, but they have to take into account what's there when they get there. They can't just through manifest destiny. They can't just like say, this is how things are going to be. It's here's how we want things to be, but based on what's here, here's how we'll zigzag to try to get what it is we want, but also pay homage to what's here. So what do you, the frontiers of what did you say? Frontiers of industry?
The frontiers of a particular sector or specialty. But I just want to stay with this idea of frontier for a second, because I think it's a really good one. And it comes back to being lost. Remember we talked about
Yes, sure.
I love Daniel Boone. Daniel Boone was a frontiersman.
I visited his house.
You did?
In an earlier episode, I had visited that mathematician's grave. I visited Daniel Boone's house. Daniel Boone was born in New Jersey.
Oh, my God.
Unless it was Pennsylvania, because I live in Pennsylvania now, but I think it was New Jersey. Anyway, I was at his home, right. I was at his home. He went down south afterwards, but he was born in New Jersey. He probably took the turnpike down. He took Route 80 down.
I don't think so.
Right.
So Daniel Boone was a frontiersman, and Daniel Boone would push the limits of the colonies. And now this gets into what it takes to be a frontiers person. And for all of those association execs who are listening, you should think about what it takes to be at the frontier of your particular sector, your profession or trade. To the average colonist, or maybe not even the average colonist, to the leaders of the colonies, the idea of subsisting out on the edge of civilization was very scary. I mean, there's Indians out there, there's bears, there's no supply lines, all of that. But it wasn't scary to Daniel Boone, because Daniel Boone was comfortable making friends with the Indians. Daniel Boone was comfortable with the hunting and supplying his own food. Daniel Boone enjoyed traveling where there were not yet roads. So all of the things that the people in the urban areas were scared of or lacked skills in, Daniel Boone enjoyed and had skills in, which made him a really good interface between the edge of civilization and the new frontier where we wanted to go. And you find those skill sets with frontiers people. There are people who are comfortable operating with little infrastructure and operating in an environment where they have to, hunt to eat, so to speak. They have to go out and get their own stuff. And so when we're talking about pushing the envelope, when we're talking about, really extending the frontier, you want people like that at the periphery. And those people, by the way, are the people who love your book, Accidental Genius, because that's a tool set for that pushing of that envelope, that frontier. That's the kind of thing that they really enjoy having in their toolbox.
Yeah, well, something you said really resonated with me. And where you said, what does it mean for you as association leaders to be at the front, to be created, at this frontier? And I as a matter of fact, it resonated with me so much, I even listened to anything else you said. No, I listened to it. I did. But it did stop me for a couple of seconds where I was thinking about that, because to me, at least, it's this idea of how much should you be solving the problems of today, and how much should you be pushing the envelope forward, or are those mutually exclusive? Maybe they're not. Again, I've said this before, I'm a big believer in the work I do. So I'm a big believer in the fact that proper differentiation takes care of a lot of ills. That when you're differentiated properly, a lot of things, both things that you expected to directly be connected or affected, but things out in the periphery get corrected too. So that would kind of be this idea of going to the frontier. And by going to the frontier, you might be solving problems or creating opportunities that are unexpected. But it's super interesting, because I know, to me, I'm always trying to look at creating something different or something new. Forgive me for talking about myself, everyone listening. But that's so crucial to me, that experimentation go on at some point. But what's the difference between the equation? You're a mathematician. The equation, how much experimentation should be going on and how much should you be solving the problems that are just sitting there that need to be solved for today?
Well, I think there's a big difference between keeping the trains running on time and solving the problems for today. I think solving the problems for today can easily be related to pushing the bounds of your field, because those problems could be indicators of something that you don't quite have under control or understand. However, when we talk about operational execution, that is such a different skill set. I am an advocate for a firewall between those people who are committed to keeping the trains running on time and those people who are doing strategic foresight, because I think they require really different skill sets, and it's an unusual person who can do both. They do exist, but most people are really good at one or the other.
Right. So you're saying having people keep the day-to-day working well.
Right.
That's one skill set. And looking to the future is a different skill set.
That's right.
Well, I guess looking to the future would potentially disrupt the daily work.
Absolutely, it would.
And so, yeah. And we're looking to the future.
We are 3 years from now, right?
Already
+3.
That's right. So to go back then to this idea of how do people in the association, how do they know what the frontier is?
Like, how do they know what the frontier of their sector is? Of their profession? Yeah. Well, I mean, again, you've got this captured group, which is your membership. It could be 60,000 people. It could be 250 organizations. But as you kind of imagine them owning this domain, you start to see places where there's high concentration, and you see places where it's much thinner. And then you see people who are really out there doing some stuff that looks crazy from all the people who are like in that central area. That's the periphery. That's where you find the edge. Now, sometimes you need to go outside the organization to consult with a thought leader in order to understand the periphery, because your members are so focused on the day-to-day needs that they have. They're not doing a good job of really pushing the bounds, of looking far into the future or seeing the needs that are emerging. And in that case, you might need an analyst whose specific job is to do that. For example, I worked with the National Apartment Association many years ago, and we actually had a real estate analyst who was the king of real estate trends. And he had a little tiny subset on rental. And we asked him to drill into that and to spell out for us what were the trends in the rental space and what might we look forward to in the year or two ahead. And he was able to do that very well, much better than many of the members were able to do it.
Right. You look at the trends and then you look at the implications for the trends.
And yes, and some of the trends are like, for example, one of the trends that most people in the rental space did not understand was that America, this was 2007. In America, we were losing this idea that to be successful, you had to own your own home. That for a long time, that was unquestionable. If you wanted to be successful in your family and your finances, you had to own a home. It was an investment. And suddenly you could see a shift in the working patterns. There were many young people who were going into cities for very short periods of time, renting homes, doing very well at their jobs, and then leaving. And mobility was on the upswing. And so there are a lot of people who didn't want to mow a lawn, a lot of people who didn't want to, have to deal with the fact that they owned the building. They had to do structural, upgrades or whatever. They wanted someone else to take care of that. They're happy to pay for someone else to take care of that. And so the mythos of America was changing in a way that affected the rental space, the rental industry.
Right. Because people thought if you own your own home, they were looking at owning your home as, like that's money that they had, rather than that's a liability that they have. And I'm talking here from a 10-acre ranch or farm, pardon me.
And how old is your 10-acre farm?
My 10-acre farm is from the year 1748.
Yeah. So we know what you're talking about.
I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Interesting. So, I can't get off this idea of the frontier
I love the frontier.
That we discuss. Well, because to me, one of the things that I like, I've never referred to the future as the frontier. I mean, I know space, the final frontier.
We all know that, right?
Right. But it's this idea of frontier as something, frontier has connotations to me of something that exists already. And so I guess when I think about the future, I don't find that interesting to me, because it's not something that exists. The future doesn't exist, nor will it ever exist, right? It's always going to be the present.
The past doesn't exist either, right?
Right. It's always, you're just always going to be, it's always now. As a matter of fact, right, some people, have we talked about this before? Some people would argue, time is a human construct. And people would argue that we're still living in the time of T-Rex.
That's right.
And Napoleon and whatnot. We've decided what minutes and seconds were or whatnot. And so that's one conception of it. But in another way, it's all just an eternal present.
Although, as human beings, we have a particularly fat slice of the eternal present. And that's what it gives us the ability to reflect, to think. That's what gives us the ability to hear music, right? Because if we were just in the moment, then the note that was playing right now would not exist in relationship to silence or other notes that came before it or after it. Right. So our neural circuitry allows us to actually compare and contrast the immediate past with what's taking place right now.
Right. You're saying a note in isolation wouldn't be music. It would just be a sound.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Got it. Interesting. So, but this idea of the frontier, and then I promise I'll leave this. Right. This idea of the frontier is very captivating to me, because frontier I see as a physical space, like there's actual things there, and so it allows me to think about it in a much more clear and interesting way.
So like if you're Daniel Boone and you're thinking about the Columbia River, right? Like
wasn't Daniel Boone the king of the wild frontier?
Yes, he was. But that only happened I think about 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
No, that Davy Crockett.
Oh, Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. Right.
Fess Parker.
Right. But I think he was also Daniel Boone.
Oh, he might have been.
I think he was everyone. Back in the 50s, there was only one actor, and it was Fess Parker. Yeah. But
I completely lost it. All right, you threw me.
You were talking about if you were Daniel Boone or something like that.
Yeah, and you're imagining the Columbia River, then you're going to say to yourself, it's there. I may not be there, but it's there. It's happening right now, and I just need to make my way to it, and then I'll be on the frontier, right? I'll be at the frontier. Actually, for Daniel Boone, I think the frontier was a lot closer in. But my point is the Columbia River exists, whereas the future doesn't.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's what I'm saying. And so to me, that gives me, to create something for the future, it gives me something much more solid, literally, to hold on to.
Right.
Because, it's a place.
Yeah.
It's a frontier is at the front of this that we're in.
Right.
Now, whereas the future, I don't even know what that is. Like, it's never had
So if I were going to say, let's take something that's very practical. Let's say iPhones, gadgets, electricity. We always have to plug these things in, right? It's a real hassle. You don't remember to plug in your iPhone before you go to sleep at night. You wake up and it doesn't have a charge to carry it through the day. It's like, what if there were a self-charging iPhone? What if it could actually pull the electromagnetic, field in its near proximity in and use it to regenerate its battery? Well, that doesn't exist as far as I know. I do know that they've figured out things like, how you could have appliances that could charge themselves through the internet. They've got appliances that can charge themselves through a grid in the floor that don't have to be plugged in. You just set it down on the floor and the floor creates an electromagnetic field. So, where's the frontier of recharging, gadgets? Is it in that space where we're harvesting? What you're going to say something? Go ahead.
No. I'm hearing what you're saying. So based on what you're saying, I'm thinking that the frontier is always based on ideas that are relevant today.
Yes.
So the frontier, when I think about the frontier, not when I think about the future. But when I think about the frontier, it always has its hand in today. Whereas the future, it's like who knows what the hell's going to be flying around there? Like, I just have flying would probably be too old school. I don't even know what's going to be happening there. It's so out of the realm of lived experience. But frontier is just, okay, if I keep going today, I'll get to this newer thing that's at the edge.
Right. In knowledge management, one of the things we dealt with was the continuum of data, information, and knowledge. And that you see there's actually a direction, just like time flows in one direction, knowledge turns into information. So, for example, when Christopher Columbus was sailing the ocean to come to North America, he had knowledge about how to navigate the winds and the currents of the sea to get away from Europe, right? And to move west. That knowledge is not knowledge anymore. That's information. You and I can get that information. It's well known. It has been for a very long time. Back then, it was knowledge. It was not just, so there's this constant flow where knowledge ends up turning into information. It's like it gets commoditized. And so the frontier of knowledge is very grounded in today, just like you were talking about. And it's an ever refreshing space.
What's the difference between knowledge and information? I know one you said in a wise way, and the other you said with disdain. So let me put it this way. What's the difference between knowledge and information?
Well, information does not have know-how built into it. It's a lot closer to data, right? So like if you and I were planning a trip, and I said, what's the weather going to be where we go? You would go get that information. But if you could talk to me about the experience that we're likely to have, since I haven't been there, that would be knowledge for me. So the information, I would feed it in. I'd go, okay, it's going to be 70 degrees and sunny winter. That sounds good. But you might say to me, oh no, that's actually the exact configuration that precipitates tornadoes where we're going to go, right? Because that's knowledge that you have. I don't have that. So it's talking about a kind of a continuum there.
Got you. Interesting. And so what should you, in creation of the frontier or exploring the frontier, should it be based on knowledge or information, or is that the wrong question?
In exploring it, you need to have both. You need to have a lot of data points. That's information, but you also need to have the knowledge. You need to have the expertise and experience of people who really understand a particular field. So, for example, if you were looking at the genetic development of proteins in legumes.
I was just doing that yesterday.
There's a certain amount of knowledge that you've got to have to be abreast of what's going on in that space right now. They are genetically modifying legumes so that there are entire factories taking place inside their cells, processing things where before they used to just sit inert and we used to have to extract stuff from them, right? So these genetic that's like out basically. The only way I know that is that I was talking to someone who was an expert in that space a couple of days ago. But that's knowledge that he has that I wouldn't have if I were going to help, for example, talk about options for vegan protein needs, something like that.
Right. Interesting. Were you talking about legumes as part of your work?
Yes, I was.
Oh my God.
It's one of the great pleasures.
What kind of a job do you have?
I get to talk to all kinds of people.
I love that.
Yeah.
What was this, without giving away secrets, what was this legume work that you were doing?
There was no secret. I was trying to understand the space, the domain around fats. And so we were looking at seed production and the seeds that, normally provide fats to. So, lentils, canola, all of the different kinds of legumes that are out there. And what is the frontier of production in those spaces right now, in particular in China and Europe and the United States, because we're all at very different levels. And as you know, we're in a competition right now with China, but we're also in a competition with Europe to understand the production. Fats are they're part of a healthy diet, but there's so much more than that. I mean, there's industrial uses for fats. There's so much going on there. So I was trying to understand that space so that I could work with the association that focuses on fats and help them suss out the frontier of their organization.
Back to frontiers. The frontier of fats.
Yeah. The frontier of fats, so that I can understand the frontier of the Fats Association.
Right.
I can tell you what their acronym is, but I can't tell you what it stands for. Let me see if I can find it out real fast.
But while you're looking it up, did you find it yet?
I see that their subtitle, it's AOCS. Their subtitle is Your Global Fats and Oils Connection, which tells me they're no longer using the acronym of their.
Right. It's interesting. For some reason, this comes to mind as we're talking, is the other day being on my farm from 1748 that I know about the frontier is I was cleaning out part of the property. I got a big machete.
Oh,
I was beyond excited. I had got like the top of the line machete because I used to have like a stinky machete, and I got like a machete with like a professional grip on it and a heavy machete.
You have to be careful with heavy machetes.
Yeah.
That's like having a chainsaw. It's not a
right. Oh, and I was yes. Oh, no, I'm aware. Very cautious. But I was not cautious in another way. So I was clearing out vines and things by one of the buildings on my property. I have all these, where the water is and so forth. So I was clearing it out. And then the next day, I totally broke out in poison ivy.
Oh.
You would never have that problem being out in the woods and being a tractor and whatnot. But I was covered. As a matter of fact, I was so covered in poison ivy that I went to an emergency, like one of these, not an emergency room, but a walk-in place like 2 days after. And the woman who was typing up my name and my information, and she said, you're here for poison ivy? And I said, yeah. And I rolled down only one of my sleeves that I had poison ivy. And I said, yeah, I broke out. And when she looked at it, she went, ugh. Like she totally cringed, and you don't want to see the person in the emergency room cringing.
No, it's not a good sign.
It doesn't inspire confidence. It didn't bother me actually, but the reason why I'm saying all this stuff, we're talking about fats and legumes and whatnot, is that I was so impressed with poison ivy's ability to defend itself. Like I was so screwed up by something that couldn't really move.
Right.
That I, of course, was in awe of it. I wanted like an autographed picture of poison ivy. And I was so impressed with its abilities that I looked it up. And are you aware poison ivy is in the cashew family?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, I love cashews. So maybe the poison ivy they thought like I was eating its babies or something like that. But I was super impressed, like part of the same, genus or whatever you would call it. Here's part of it that I ingested and loved. And here's part of it that I rubbed up against, and it totally immobilized me. I was just so impressed that.
Quick camping tip. You have to be really careful that you don't burn poison ivy because it can go into the air and you can inhale it.
Oh, and then all that
happens inside your lungs.
Happens inside your lungs.
Yeah.
And what's it do? And like what happens in there? It constricts.
Bad news.
Right.
Not good.
Oh my God. Have you ever?
No, I haven't. But it's one of those things you want to be careful about. Speaking of the American Oil Chemists Society,
right?
That is the Fats Trade Association that we were just talking about.
Right.
That's all. I just wanted to say I found the name of it.
All right. Excellent.
Very excited about working with them. I don't know if I will be engaged with them, but I have started talking with them, and it's very cool. It's like, ever had that experience where a client comes to you or a potential client comes to you and they start talking about the space you're in, and you're going, I know nothing about this. This is so cool. That's the reaction I had talking to these people.
Right, that you're going to get to learn about something extraordinary.
Already learning about it. Genetic factories inside legumes.
And with that, That is the end of another episode of Planet of the Associations. I'm Mark Levy.
And I'm Seth Kahan.
We will see you next time.